What is going on with this crazy market, Delynn? There's buyers everywhere. There's no inventory. What the heck are people going to do?
I don't know. Maybe we can coach them through it.
Hey. Hello, everybody. My name is Barry Horvath, and this is Moving Forward TV with your local market update.
And I am Delynn Gaston. Thank you so much for joining us. So, what is with this crazy market? Everybody knows it's going nuts out there, right? 15,000 offers on a property, people lined up.
15,000?
Yes.
Is that a new record? I've not heard about this one.
It's crazy.
Is that one of your buyers?
Yes, and they lost the bid.
Shocking.
Imagine that.
Shocking. It's actually, you know what's really funny right now? It's almost really exciting. Yeah, what's funny? What's funny about this market? It's actually exciting when we see a contract actually come in executed.
I know.
But have you noticed, though, in this crazy market that there's more cancellations than we have ever seen? Because I think people are, like, we have people putting in offers blindly right now, and then all of a sudden they check out the property and are like, ooh, I didn't know that was there, or whatever. So,
it's really kind of crazy, and you have to be different in order to win the bid. It seems there's everybody's out there. You can't do the letters anymore. You can't do. You have to be very careful.
You can, but there's liability.
I know. You have to be very careful with those kinds of things. So, people are, we're not sure what to do. They're waiving appraisals. Not a good idea. They're waiving home inspections. Not a good idea. But maybe we can come up with some good things that they can do.
Yeah, so we have this week a very, very special guest we're going to bring on, and he is here to help you all with your business because he is a real estate coach. We actually, very well respected, coaches the top agents all around the country. We're actually honored to bring him on with us today, and we're going to get his insight on the market. And we have Bill Middleton with us from Middleton Elite Coaching. I couldn't get that all out, Bill. It's really a long...
It's a morning, and he hasn't had that whole cup of coffee yet.
I've had, actually, this is my second.
Okay. I'm trying to give you an excuse here.
That's all right. Thanks for the backup.
Sure.
So, Bill, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us. How are things out there in Hilton Head Island right now?
Hey, Barry, thanks. I'm happy to be here. Things are great. It's another sunshiny day, probably just like it is there.
Yeah, I know you study the market probably. I know you have agents all around the country, but is this hot market that we're referring to going on in every state of the agents you're coaching right now, or is it just pockets like, I don't know, South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, Barry, I mean, as you guys know, every real estate market is a little bit different. However, to put a blanket statement on it, what we're experiencing is happening in all parts of the country. I mean, it does tend to be statistically more concentrated in the Southeast right now than in other parts of the country. Yet we coach clients in 16 different states and Canada, and I'm hearing basically the same story from everyone.
Canada.
And what do you think that is, the Southeast? Is it because there was such a harsh winter across the country this past winter, and people are just moving south? What do you think it is? Job opportunities?
Yeah, all good questions, Delynn. I mean, I think if we were to be stereotypical in the response on this, it's a combination of weather and moving closer to family, and their money just goes farther in most cases. If we're talking about West Coast dollars converting to Southeast dollars or Northeast dollars converting to Southeast dollars, those sellers of properties there are cashing in on that equity that they're getting, and are bringing that equity to the parts of the country where you and I and many of your listeners probably live.
You're absolutely correct. That's what we're seeing is a lot of cash buyers, more than we have ever had before. And after the real estate crash of the mid-2000s there, we definitely had a lot of cash coming into the markets, but not as much as now. It's even more now. And I don't know if it's happening where you are as well, but they're bidding way over asking price, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 over asking price.
Sure.
Because they are so cash rich right now from, as you said, selling their property up north or out west.
Correct.
Is that happening elsewhere as well? The over asking price stuff?
Seeing that everywhere right now. And you're describing the factors that are really driving that.
So how do you coach your agents to sell that to a potential buyer to pay over list price? How is that okay? Why, we know on the lending side that we lend on the appraised value or the contract price, whichever is lower. And we're actually having to see buyers come up with extra cash to cover it on a lot of financing deals. So what are you telling your agents? I know you do panels and you with your top agents out there, they're still getting contracts, right? They're still busy. But this is a market like we've never seen before.
Yeah, they're all great questions, Barry. And I guess the first thing I'll say is that we always approach this from the viewpoint of it's our role to educate the buyers and sellers, and therefore to give them an opportunity to make their own decision. And I could go on for hours on this topic, so I'll kind of be brief. And then if you'd like for me to dig in deeper, I'll be happy to do that. One of the things to consider is that in a market like we're in right now, supply and demand economics drives everything, and real estate is no different. So you have undersupply relative to the amount of demand, and that's what's driving prices up. For those of you who are watching this at home, if you wanted to scribble a couple of notes that are really attributing to that, in no particular order, number one, which we just touched on briefly, is net migration. Are there more people moving into your area or out of your area? So if you're in those parts of the country where you're seeing people moving in, that creates additional demand above and beyond what you might have in sort of a more normalized market. The second thing is demographic trends. The millennial generation, adjusted for immigration, is the largest demographic cohort this country's ever seen, even more so than the baby boomers. And statistically, that generation has entered and is accelerating through their peak home buying years. And so we've got excess demand there. And if you layer on top of that federal monetary policy, interest rates being held artificially low, stimulus being pumped into the economy, which is not a political statement in any way, it's just purely an economic statement. So you have excess demand from net migration, you have excess demand from demographics, and you have stimulus money and artificially low interest rates. All of that continues to drive demand. So back to the question about pricing and how might we advise something, a buyer in that situation. Buyer says, should I buy now or should I wait? Should I pay this or should I pay that? My answer is always, it depends. It depends on their motivation. It depends on their timeline. It depends on how long they plan to be in the home. There are a number of factors that we'd want them to look at there. The final sort of 10,000-foot view comment I'll make on this, and then we can dig into anything else you'd like to, is there in a market like what we're in right now, we believe that each home actually has two prices. One price is the price that you could arrive at by doing some sort of comparable-based approach, an appraisal-based approach. Recent sold comps and price per square foot and all the things that you would learn as a real estate agent or an appraiser. The second price, though, is what the buyers in the market are willing to pay for it. And you've heard that before, yet most of the time those two numbers are very, very close to the same. What's confusing for people right now is that those two numbers are very different. And they're very different because of these three demand factors. When you've got super low supply, you've got excess demand, and you've got excess liquidity, there's this divergence between the comp-based approach of prices and what the buyer's willing to pay. So in some instances, the buyers may be, quote, spending their first year of equity or maybe their first 18 months worth of equity. However, you got to sort of mathematically weigh that against the advantage of the super low interest rates now and where interest rates might be a year or 18 months from now. There's a whole lot of stuff we could unpack there. However, that's sort of the summary version of what's going on.
Wow, I love that.
I know.
I love it. You just hit the nail on the head right there, Bill. That's home run information. It sounds like basic economics to people, but it is common sense. So people are, you know what people ask me right now? Number one question, oh, this market is going to implode. The housing market's going to come down. And with everything you just stated, and we actually did a briefing on this last week, this is not like 2008, 2009. We're not I feel we're not overinflated at all. I mean, we have appraisers, like, we put handcuffs on them right now before they go out and inspect a property. They're afraid to bring in values too high. Where in 08 and 09, it was the Wild Wild West out there. It was a different time. I mean, underwriters are scrutinizing these appraisals, so while everything's not appraising, people come up with a cash difference. And, the price of supplies to build new housing right now, as we all know, is gone up because of, this pandemic. Lumber prices, metal prices, concrete prices. We had short supply of that. Those prices are going up. Cost of building is going to go up. Well, when the cost of building going up, the resales are going to just follow suit. So that's all part of the trend too, in my, just my humble opinion of what's going on out there.
Sure.
So one of the things that you had mentioned, Bill, that I wanted to just touch on real quick, you had said about the supply and demand, and I could not agree with you more, as Barry just said as well. Other parts of the country, are they experiencing the same short supply that we have down here as well? I know there's no building going on, as Barry just said, because of the cost of construction and just getting labor. People are not apparently getting, employees is difficult right now to manufacture the nuts and bolts and screws and things like that the builders all need. So is that in other parts of the country as well? I'm just really curious because I don't get out of Florida much.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is the macroeconomic factors that you're seeing in whether it's new home construction or inventory or whatever, that's, to make a blanket statement, are impacting a lot of people. I think if you read the stuff coming out of, like, the National Association of Home Builders as an example, they're predicting that this is sort of a temporary thing that sometime over the next 6 months plus should normalize. And there's a whole nother conversation we could have as to why there's a squeeze on all of these building materials that is largely rooted in people getting a little bit scared and contracting when COVID first, sort of became a mainstream concern back in March, April of last year. Some of those who follow the work that we do know around that time, roughly 13, 14 months ago, we were actually saying, hang on, don't slash and burn everything. Let's pay attention to what's going on in the market and look for ways that you could strategically double down on things that are working for you. So there are little pockets where whether it's builders have done that or investors have done that, where they actually gain market share during this period because they didn't freak out like a lot of other people did.
So what are some things that maybe some, ideas that we can, one, help keep the buyers motivated, right? Because a lot of them are giving up. They're just
they get discouraged.
They're so discouraged because they literally they've put
months and months.
I had one client put 20 offers in on houses and lost all of them. And this was a good kid. I mean, he had 20% down and, a good hardworking kid, and
Sure.
20 offers, and he lost the bid on all of them.
Right. Well, I think there's a
motivated?
couple of different answers to that question, and some of it is rooted in making sure that the buyers understand the dynamics of the market. So let's go back to Barry's comment for a second about how some believe that we're in a bubble or some believe that we're due for some massive correction. And much like a great teacher or professor might say, they would say, well, what's your evidence for that? Like, we're all entitled to our opinions, and that's totally fine. However, we're talking about attempting to predict directions of markets, which, barring any sort of outside major threat, is actually not all that difficult to predict the direction of the real estate market. And your canary in the coal mine is always going to be months' supply of inventory. So let's do a quick little history lesson on this. If you go back to the last real estate bubble, the start of the Great Recession, month's supply of inventory, according to NAR, at that point in time was 12 months across the country, 12 months supply. And those of us who were in the business at that time understand why. It was easy to borrow money, and there was a lot of speculative building going on, and that created this glut of supply. And it just took a little bit for the market to realize there was this oversupply, and then the bottom fell out. I'm obviously grossly oversimplifying that. However, that was the dynamic that was driving it. So you got 12 months worth of supply. For those who are watching at home, you may or may not know that a roughly balanced real estate market, there are no advantages to buyers or sellers, and pricing is roughly flat, is going to be 4 to 6 months worth of supply. And anything less than 4 months of supply, you're going to continue to see price appreciation. So if you want to predict the direction of the market, you just start looking at months of supply. So let's fast forward to the most recent report from the National Association of Realtors showed that across the country right now, we have about 2 months worth of supply.
Wow.
So if you look at that number and you say, how is 2008, 9, 10, that era different than it is right now, you need to look no further than months worth of supply. And you can drill that down to your local market level. And a lot of the training that we do, we say not only drill it down to the local market level, also drill it down to certain price ranges, and then track that on a monthly basis. And you'll actually see the trend line before you feel the trend line. So go back to your question about the buyer who's frustrated. Understandably so. I mean, it's the freaking Hunger Games out there sometimes. So
right?
they've got to bring that mentality to it. And the trap, if they're not careful, is that they'll say, it's tough out there, I'm going to wait.
That's what they're doing.
And my question to them respectfully would be, how long are you willing to wait? And what's your plan for while you wait? And if their plan is, well, I think the market's going to come down, then I would say, well, what's your evidence for that? And then they would often cite the last real estate bubble. And then we'd have sort of this discussion where I'd educate them on the differences and why, barring some unforeseen circumstance, aliens come or whatever else, then the market's going to continue to head in the direction that it's going right now. And you both know this because you're well experienced in this business. There were people 4 years ago who were saying, I'm going to wait because the market's too hot. How'd that work out for them?
Yep. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So part of this is to say, I hear you. And before you go plant your flag on this is a bubble, I'd really like for us to look at the statistical evidence that it is or it isn't. And if you believe that the market's going to continue to go up, which in many markets it is, then you have to weigh the cost of prices running away from you while you wait, while also presumably watching interest rates go up. And you can look at all the economists who predict that as well. I think there's danger in waiting, and so as such, I think each buyer needs to be educated to then make their own decision based on that.
You know what? We talked about this too, that certain media outlets out there are, and let's face it, I mean, if you hear it on the news, it must be true today, right? Because everything they say is factual.
Depends on which news you listen to, though.
Sorry, that was my sarcasm meter just going up. I mean, they're about selling advertising, and let's face it, when we say, we're in a bubble, that's bad news, and people thrive to bad news for whatever reason. And I think we're with you. This market is not, the fundamentals are here for it to stay. I mean, there's no sign right now that this thing is going to burst, and you are 100% correct. Interest rates are going up right now. That's the trend. I mean,
not fast, not a huge jump,
but they are going up.
Gradually increasing.
But it's still affordable for people to own a home in this market. That sweet spot, anything that's like $250 right now is like, boom, gone. That price point is just. And
it's funny you say that. So one of my agents had posted something on Facebook yesterday. Did you see it, Kelly? And she said, this is what happens when you have a house under $250,000. And she has a picture of all these cars lined up on the street and people standing on the front lawn of this house, everybody waiting to get in to see it. Mm-hmm. That's what happens.
Yeah, it's
absolutely
crazy. We're actually seeing builders right now, Bill, that are coming back to their current customers that they're building houses for and raising the price, saying we need more money now. And I don't know from, legalities of that or whatever, but there's probably clauses in their contract that say they can raise the price because the cost of materials has now gone up. So are you seeing that in your markets as well, where they're coming back and saying, yeah, we need to renegotiate this deal?
Yeah, definitely seen a lot of variations of that where some are hesitant to lock in pricing. Some have different types of clauses in it over time. And here's an analogy that may help for the folks at home. Let's imagine that today you go out to lunch and you go down to your, I like tacos and I like food trucks. So I'm going to play with this for a second. Let's say I go out to the taco food truck for lunch today and there's a huge crowd there. There might be 100 people when normally there's 20. And the taco food truck's not prepared for that. They only have food for 50. So we got 100 people. We got 50 plates. Who wins? Well, it's either the first person in line, or if, let's just say, the taco truck went sort of auction style on this, and they said, all right, 50 people, that's all we have plates for. There are 100 of you here. Who's going to win? Well, you all know that who's going to win are going to be the 50 people who are willing to pay the most. If they went, the first person in line gets a plate. The 51st person has money. And the 51st person's waving the money at the first person with the plate. Says, I know you paid $10 for that plate of tacos and rice and beans and whatever else. I'll give you 20 for it. What's the price of the plate now? Well, the price of the plate's 20. It might say 10 on the menu, however, somebody was willing to pay 20. Now, we've all experienced situations like that before, and that's in a really simplistic approach. That's exactly what's happening in the real estate market right now. There aren't enough plates of tacos and rice and beans to go around for all the people who want it, and the people with the most money are winning.
Especially when you have 3 kids to feed. So, when you got 3 extra mouths in your house right there, and they want to watch Disney movies with you and go to the beach all the time, I'm just throwing that out there for you. I don't know.
I don't know where you're getting that.
I read it in his bio, okay? Hey, let me ask you this. Let's cut to the chase.
Yeah.
What can you tell agents out there?
I know. I love what you told. Yeah.
How do they get an offer accepted? Do you have any? Throw us a nugget for our agents.
I love how
there,
you gave us some tips on how to keep the people motivated by educating them on, waiting is not an option. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the agents.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to clarify, waiting is an option as long as they're prepared for the downside cost of waiting. And so let's talk about agents for just a second. A bit counterintuitively, I think the biggest opportunity for the real estate agent is to understand the market dynamics the way that we're describing them right now. I see a lot of agents who might even believe that we're in a bubble. I see a lot of agents who might not, either because they haven't thought about it or they haven't been trained, and that's okay. You're here to learn, and that's cool. They're not clear on what's driving the market. Therefore, they can't communicate it to their buyers. And so when the buyer says, should I buy or should I wait? Or when the buyer says, what do you think I should offer on this? And then the agent says, well, I think it's worth this. I don't think it's worth that. I think if you pay that, you're overpaying. All those iterations of that, I think it actually starts with the education of the real estate agent. To go one step further on this, though, if I were to put buyers in a couple of different buckets right now, and I think people are awesome just the way they are, and we're all doing the best that we can, you've got certain groups of buyers who have the ability to buy, yet might not have a ton of extra cash laying around. And then you've got the group of buyers who have the ability to buy and they have the extra cash laid around, whether they're a cash buyer or they have excess above what their down payment is going to be. And so if you have these two different groups of people, and I take this group who doesn't have a ton of extra access to cash, in my buyer consultation that I'm doing with them, which by the way is really kind of the key anchor point here, I want to find out, do they have the ability to go get additional cash so I could go put them over here in this other bucket? Do they have a friend or family member they could get gift funds from? Do they have a 401k they could borrow from? Do they have a life insurance policy they could borrow against? Now, I'm saying all of this as a putting myself in the shoes of the buyer, thinking about creative solutions, not as a financial advisor. However, my goal is, if possible, and if the buyer's comfortable with it, I'd like to move them from the cash-strapped, ready, willing, and able buyer over into the ready, willing, and able buyer who has excess cash. Now that the excess cash is there, we've got to figure out for them what price number 2 is. So price number 1 is the comp-based approach. Price number 2 is what they're willing to pay. So real quick, here's how you do that. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we're talking about a $300,000 house. Multiple offers, highest and best. Buyer says, I want to offer $310. As their agent, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, well, $310. Okay, let me ask you this. Let's imagine that I have to call you tomorrow and I let you know that we lost. And I found out later that the winning bid was $311. How would you feel about that? And inevitably the buyer says, oh my gosh, well, $311, we'd pay $1,000 more for it. And I'm going to say, okay, then $310 is not your highest number. And I'm going to diffuse a little bit by saying what I'd like for you to understand, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, it's not my goal to get you to overpay here. I know you want the best deal possible, and the person who gets the best deal in today's market is the one who gets the house. So if you were willing to pay $311, my goal was to figure out your walk-away number. What's the number that you would be willing to pay that if you lost by $1, you might still be upset by that. However, you could say to me, Bill, I'm bummed. However, I wasn't willing to pay $1 more. And they say, oh, okay, so $318 is my number. All right, so let me ask you this. Let's imagine I had to call you tomorrow and deliver the bad news that we lost. And I found out later that the winning bid was $318,001. How would you feel about that? I play that game until they get to a number where they say, I'd be upset, however, we weren't willing to pay $1 more. What I'm seeing happening here is a combination of under-education of the buyer, yes, and buyer leaving money on the table keeps them going back in this sort of vicious cycle. So I'd like to see them get really clear on the dynamics of the market and how they can put their best foot forward. They're going to have a better opportunity to win.
Bill, amazing. Great information.
That was so good.
Love it.
Thank you.
Man, you hit it out of the park. I love it. So check out Bill. You can find him online. It's Middleton Elite Coaching. We've got the link up here if you want to get more coaching information from him. Like I said, he's a top coach out there for a reason. So right now, real quick, we want to wrap up. And thanks, Bill, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Bill. That was amazing.
Information.
Thanks, guys.
So, hey, great information. Real quick, we want to tell you about our upcoming Lunch and Learn, June 8th, 11:30. We're going to have Florida Housing as our guest speaker. We're going to talk about down payment programs and assistance and programs they may offer. And don't forget to check out WPBA, our charity of choice, West Pasco Business Association. We still have funds available to help you with those rent payments. So that's this week's show.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. We are today and every day.
Moving forward.
See you next week.
Have a great week, everybody.